Hey guys, welcome back to RHR Jen. I'm so glad you're here. Uh, Notice my name, notice my hair, notice my pretend bruise kit. What's going on? We're talking part two of the Johnny Depp Amber Heard trial. Remember she wore those stupid braids every day? Yeah, this one's not stupid. This is the Goslings, but trying to go back to that. I should have painted on cheeks or something. But anyway, we're revisiting the Amber Heard Johnny Depp trial, and I'm with John Witherspoon, attorney out of DC, who was actually there in the courtroom. He has a connection to Ben Chew. He has some amazing behind the scenes stories, so much to talk about. Thank you to everybody who watched part one. I'm so excited for you to see part two. And if you're a member of Patreon, he's going to tell us some behind the scenes stuff there as well. Ooh, I'm so excited. So if you're not a member of Patreon, go check that out. Patreon.com/Real Housewives Recaps. Yes, it's my old name. But anyway, thank you, John, so much for taking our questions, being so kind and generous. And I'm already excited to have you back on again soon to talk more about all this stuff, whether it's Johnny Depp and Amber Heard or Harry and Meghan, everything in between. Thank you guys so much for being here. Now let's get into this video.
The lawyer's going to Johnny Depp's house for dinner. And that came out in the Shannon Curry
Oh
context
my
as
God,
well.
that's why I was laughing. I know. Elaine would
Yeah.
not let that go. Yeah.
Well, you got to do what you got to do.
Yeah.
There's this concept in the law of being a zealous advocate for your client when you're a lawyer. And sometimes you don't have a very good argument. Your argument stinks. And yet you still have to get up there and do the best you can to poke holes at the argument, or to poke holes in the person who's delivering the argument, whatever it is. Elaine probably did not have a lot of options when it came to trying to knock Dr. Curry, Shannon Curry, back on her heels.
Yeah.
So she had to resort to the muffin issue of all things, which absolutely imploded. People in the courtroom were, oh my God, get off of it. And even then Shannon Curry was like, can we talk about something besides muffins? Please. So it was almost painful at times. And then there was an issue of, oh, well, you were invited to Johnny Depp's house to go to dinner, weren't you? And you must have been very impressed. How often do you get to go?
Starstruck. Yes.
Yes, you must have been starstruck and blah, 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 blah. And it's like, no, no. I have celebrity clients. I work in Los Angeles. I've been in people's houses before that are, $50 million houses or whatever. It's like, yeah, I had a nice time. The food was good. We all enjoyed each other's company, and we talked about whether I was the right person to fulfill my role in this case. But it's kind of like, geez, I walked out, I got in my car, I went home, and
that's that. Yeah.
Right. I crawled into the bed. I mean, it's like I said, Elaine, to her credit, probably felt like that was the best card that she had to play against Shannon Curry, but it was not very good. And she played it so much.
Yeah.
And tried so hard to put a square peg into a round hole that everybody, like I said, was just kind of like, oh my goodness, get away from it, move along. And so did Shannon Curry, said the same thing. So
yeah. On a funny side note, yeah, that day I was showing the stream and recapping it. I was just like, oh my God, we should make a drinking game out of the muffin thing. And then at lunchtime, I ended up ordering in muffins to my home. I was like, look, I got muffins.
Right.
I just can't. I heard muffins so many times. I got to have a muffin now.
Yeah. Right.
I wonder how many people did that. Yeah. Muffins.
Probably more than a few. Probably more than a few. But again, again, when you're in law school, there's an entire class that you take called trial tactics. And a lot of it has to do with, the order of witnesses and, soup to nuts. But at the same time, there's an art to talking to a witness like that too. You notice, incidentally, that for the most part, when a lawyer was talking to, when one of Amber's lawyers was talking to a woman, it was always Elaine doing the talking. Same reason that Camille Vasquez was tasked to cross-examine Amber. If you had
That makes
stood a
sense.
man up, if you'd stood a male lawyer up to beat up on Amber, boy, that doesn't look very good.
No.
There's this man beating up on woman. You know, she's already claiming that she's been subject to some inappropriate treatment at the hands of a man. So you better get a good woman up there to talk to her. And, you know, it sounds all very sexist, but it's true. I'll tell you one other thing that was very interesting. On those days when Camille Vasquez, I know for sure on one of the days, might have been more than one day. I think she did. Oh, I know. It was on the day she cross-examined Amber, and it was also on the day that she stood up and gave part of the closing argument. She wore a white suit.
I remember.
And everybody thought that's a gutsy move, but she's pulled it off because she looked like $1 million. Everybody else in the courtroom is sitting there in a dark whatever. Here comes this woman dressed a vision in white, looks like an angel. How can you not like her? And how can you not be riveted on the sight of her because of what she's wearing? Very bold move, very effective move, though.
I love
Massive credit to her for that. Massive
Absolutely.
credit. And I guarantee you that she sat down with Ben Chu and said to him, I want to wear my white suit to cross-examine Amber, and I want to wear my white suit to give part of the closing argument. I'm sure that there was a substantial conversation about that.
Yeah. I find it fascinating. I really do. I think it's so interesting. Sure.
I was going to talk a little bit about the hotel angle as well, because I know we talked about that. We were discussing the eccentricities and the fascinating aspects of the line and so forth. As I said, there were people there from all over the world, not only media, TV crews and newspaper reporters. There were spectators there that had come from all over the world. There was a British woman there who had recently been divorced, and she was kind of consoling herself, I think, by taking on some very, very substantial travel. And I think she had been in Los Angeles and maybe in the Far East or in Hawaii or something like that. She clearly had a ton of money.
Yeah.
Very nice lady. And I would characterize her as sort of an aging, she was probably in her 60s, but she was kind of dressed like she was in her 20s and she was going to go out clubbing. She was a very, very fun, interesting person to watch. She was staying at the Ritz-Carlton Hotel in Tysons Corner, Virginia, which is about 10 miles from where the courthouse was. And there's an interstate that runs, or interstate for people not outside the US is it's a high-speed road, 4 or 5 lanes in each direction, a lot of traffic and so forth. She was staying at the Ritz-Carlton Hotel, and I'm not even sure she had planned to attend the trial. But like a lot of people, she got very excited about the trial and very interested in coming in and so forth and seeing it. So she didn't have a car, though. So she was having to take a taxi back and forth, and it was a pain in the neck and all kinds of problems. There's another woman there who was in her 20s from New York City. Jessica Jarva, I believe, was her name. Very interesting woman. An artist. I think she's in a band in New York, travels all around. She had driven down from New York to Washington, which is I think it's probably about 4 hours, in a Volvo, an old Volvo sedan that was barely held together. And she was sleeping in that car, in the back seat of that car, in the parking garage of the courthouse.
Oh my gosh.
Anyway, the two of them, this 60-year-old woman, this British woman, and this woman from New York, hit it off and became best buddies. And they struck a deal. I'll let you come and stay in my room at the Ritz-Carlton if you promise to drive me back and forth between the hotel and the courthouse. You talk about an odd couple. They were an odd couple as far as their age. I think they were probably internally wired up exactly the same. They're like two peas in a pod. They're rock and rollers 40 years apart. But it was so amusing, and they just had the best time. One thing I'll mention too, talking about Johnny Depp staying at, I as best I could understand it, I'll have to check with Ben, but I believe that Johnny Depp and the Depp legal team had an entire floor at the Ritz-Carlton in Tyson's Corner, which, I mean, again, maybe they give you a discount if you book more than so many rooms, but I would say probably $500 per night per room, and they've got a whole floor. Again, you're talking Johnny Depp money, though. It's you gotta get outside your own parameters.
My purse is crying right now hearing this.
Yes. Yes. Anyway, there's a restaurant. It's one of those restaurants that's attached to a hotel, and it's like you go out the back door of the restaurant and you're in the hotel lobby. You go out the front door of the restaurant and you're on the street. A lot of hotels have that set up.
Yes.
It's called the Palm.
Okay.
Very nice restaurant, very upscale, which is in keeping with the Ritz-Carlton. And one of the interesting things about the Palm is that if you are a celebrity and you go to the Palm and you spend over a certain dollar amount, they will put your portrait, a hand-drawn, it's like drawn with magic markers almost. There's an artist that does them, and there are other Palm restaurants where they have, people who've been in the Palm know exactly what I'm talking about, but all of these caricatures, and they're about this big, and they put them on the walls in the restaurant. And it's always fun to go in there because you go, oh, here's this and here's that person, and and it's not just Hollywood people. It's if
like who's who, like
if you're on the list, you're on the list. If you know, kind of a thing. Anyway, you have to spend a certain dollar amount, and I think it's something like, it's not cheap. I think it's like $20,000 or something like that. Before they deem you worthy of having your picture on the wall. Anyway, the interesting thing is, in that restaurant, people who are familiar with Johnny Depp might know that he really got his start in the film business thanks to Nicolas Cage. I believe they were both involved in the music scene. There's a club in Los Angeles, which I don't think is there anymore. I believe it's called the Viper Room. And I'm sure I'm screwing up the details of this, but somehow Nicolas Cage and Johnny Depp both played instruments, and they played in bands somehow at the Viper Room in LA. I think the Viper Room, somebody died there as well. I'm sure somebody will put it in the comments, but there was some celebrity that met their demise there, I think, because of having taken too many of something or other.
Yes.
Yeah, substances. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. I wanted to get a picture of the Johnny Depp caricature on the wall, and I went in there one day. This is long after the trial. And I talked to this young woman who was, I think, in high school, who was the hostess at the front door. And I said, hi, I just want to stick my head in here. I'd like to see the Johnny Depp caricature, the portrait. Oh, it's right back, go down here and turn left, and it's in the last booth against the wall, whatever. So I did that. Anyway, I came back out. I got a picture of it. I came back out, and I started chatting with this woman, and I said, tell if you don't mind telling me what was it like? Johnny Depp was in that restaurant every night to eat. There was a little private dining area that had a big table, and I think it had about 12 or 15 chairs, and Johnny and the legal team would go in there at the end of every day. And they would have dinner, and they would just sort of decompress and talk a little bit of strategy and so forth. Anyway, this young woman said that she was fascinated by the trial. She was very jealous of me having been there. She said that her high school teacher, one of her teachers, I think a civics teacher or something, had assigned her class to watch the trial on TV and then to come in and talk about it the following day. And that they were using that as an introduction to the legal system, which is very clever. I mean, that saves a lot of work for the teacher, and it also the kids are riveted by this just like everybody else, and they're seeing what's going on. And she said, I got this very strong interest in the law, and said, of course, I have to go to college first before I think about law school, but she was just very excited about it. The thing that was funny was that I said to her, there had been this rumor that Johnny Depp was obsessed with chicken parmesan.
Oh.
Apparently at the Palm, I guess it's one of their sort of signature recipes. Apparently they serve this enormous chicken parmesan.
Oh, that's my all-time favorite dish. That's why when you said it, I was like, oh, I got to go there.
That's and apparently food. It's really, really good.
Oh,
and
good.
The story was that Johnny Depp wanted that chicken parmesan just about every night. And then he would ask anybody else at the table want the other half of this chicken parmesan, because it's kind of too much for one person to eat. But I said to her, knowing what I know and people being people, I said, did Johnny Depp ever come in here and say, I don't like anything on the menu, I want steak tartare, or I want, shish kebab, or what? Right. And then the poor waitress or waiter server has to go back into the kitchen and beg the chef, Johnny Depp wants shish kebab. It's not, can you make shish kebab for Johnny Depp? And then the, chef is trying to make sense of it all. She said he never ordered anything that was not on the menu.
Oh, that's good.
He was very gracious. He just really liked that chicken parmesan. So
my mouth is watering. I gotta go get chicken parmesan. I was smiling though because it's so weird that you're saying this. For the first time in my life, I tried the Palm restaurant this year. I didn't go. I was taken to the Palm restaurant. Yes.
Oh, how fun.
Never in my life had I been, and I'm not even really familiar with it because it's not in my area. But yeah, I just happened to be in a place, and I went with somebody and was taken to the Palm. It was delicious. I had steak actually. I was like,
yeah, it's a really good restaurant. It's really, good. They wouldn't have it in the Ritz-Carlton if it wasn't a good restaurant.
Yeah.
So it kind of, it's proximity to the Ritz-Carlton.
Yeah.
Kind of tells you what you need to know. And there's one in downtown Washington, and they're around. There's one in Chicago. They're in big cities in Chicago, and I think there's one in Las Vegas. I'm sure they're in New York as well, and Boston, and so forth. But
I need to go back and order the chicken parmesan. Apparently,
hey, believe me, I've thought about it. I've thought about it, and also I want to sit in the room where Johnny Depp ate chicken parmesan. Yes. Set the private dining room table for me, please.
Hey, when you get your big YouTube channel going, you need to go there, order that, and put it on film or whatever and show people what it looks like. And
yet another idea, put that in the comments if you want to see the Palm chicken parmesan and Johnny Depp's picture.
That's right.
I'll put that in a video.
Can you send me the doggy bag down to Florida, please?
Yeah, there you go. Right. Put a little FedEx box here. Hurry up. Before it gets cold.
That's right. I'll still eat it. I don't care. I love chicken parm. That's my favorite dish.
Good.
That's awesome. But I love circling back. I love to hear stories like that. And I always say the same and bring it around to Harry. That dude's a jackass. Like from what I could tell from the stories I hear. And I always think, and I say that like, it's how people treat people when they don't think you're watching. Because we saw Harry in front of the courtroom. I always go to this. He rammed into that photographer who was not in his way just to be a dick, and so again, I think, in my opinion, he didn't think he'd be caught doing that, or he just didn't think that anybody would call him out for doing that. And you can just see his behavior versus, again, Johnny Depp. He's used to it, but he's probably not thinking, I wonder if people will report back if I was a jerk at this restaurant. He's just being a nice guy. So that's
right. You know what else? Again, this just popped into my head, but you might recall during the trial, Johnny Depp's sister took the stand and talked about their growing up together, and they were friends, and they played Batman and Robin and all these types of things. And I had the chance to talk to her at one point, very briefly, but she was so kind. Was she? And I mean, if you've never been to Kentucky, you don't understand this. But there's a ruralness to Kentucky. There's a southernness to Kentucky. There's a humility to Kentucky. it's in kind of everybody knows Dolly Parton. Dolly Parton's of course in Tennessee, but that's right
Yeah.
next to Kentucky.
Oh, yeah, that whole
It,
area, yeah.
it's a kind of Dolly Parton-esque
Mhm,
personality that,
mhm,
again, there's a southernness, there's a ruralness, there's a
mhm.
kindness, there's a friendliness to it. And Johnny Depp's sister was exactly the same way. And I remember talking to her just very briefly and getting the same impression from her, just of so gracious and, oh, thank you very much. That's very kind of you. And well, I hope things are going well. The trial seems to be doing okay, blah, blah, blah.
Nice.
And I thought, okay, this woman was raised as a sibling, a close sibling to this guy.
Mhm,
And for all of his faults, and everybody knows what they are, his substance abuse issues and all of that other stuff,
mhm.
at his core, he's still just a really, really decent human being.
Yeah, so
And
good.
I think the jury probably sensed the exact same thing.
Hmm.
My dad is also a lawyer, as I think I mentioned. He used to do a lot of testifying in federal courts
Mhm.
about some incredibly difficult topics. He has a besides a law degree, he has a master's degree in chemistry.
Wow.
And so
Mm,
he would go into court
mm.
sometimes to talk about some really far-flung stuff that just would absolutely make your head spin.
Uh-huh.
And he used to always say, and I think he was paraphrasing another lawyer, but he always used to say, you know what? Juries have a sixth sense. They can tell who's telling the truth. They can tell who's trying to tell the truth, but not really pulling it off as effectively. Um, they know who they like. They know who they don't like. They know who they believe. They
Mhm.
know who to trust. Even if they don't understand everything that's going on, they have an ability to read people kind of in the same way that a dog reads somebody. You know
Yeah,
what I mean? It's
sure.
just that I like you or I don't like you.
Mhm.
And um, Johnny Depp, like I said, he just exudes that same um, thing that led him to shake hands with all of the deputies coming into the courtroom in the morning.
Uh-huh.
That aspect of his personality bled through when he was actually in front of the jury. Even though he wasn't shaking hands and doing all that kind of thing,
Sure.
it was not something that you could easily overlook. One thing I should mention as well, since I keep talking about the deputies, was very interesting when Amber Heard would get up to take the witness stand. She had to walk in front of the counsel table, literally
Yeah.
almost within arm's reach of where Johnny Depp was. They
Mm,
had a female sheriff's deputy escort her from her seat on her side of the courtroom
mhm.
in front of the judge and walk her around until she got in the witness box, and then the deputy would, and the same thing when she got up to leave,
Yeah.
deputy would go over and basically retrieve her and escort her back. I always thought that was very interesting.
Yeah, I can guess the psychology behind it. I'm marinating. I'm processing what you're saying. I'm guessing they did that on purpose, right? To look like, "Oh, I'm scared of Johnny. He's so terrible. He's a monster," right? I mean,
Well, yes, and I mean that would have been one of those things. There are these pretrial conferences that are always held, and the lawyers and the judge sit down and they hash out all this kind of stuff. I mean, Johnny Depp's a weird scenario. That case was a weird scenario where you've got basically two celebrities. Johnny Depp being much more of a celebrity than
sure.
Amber Heard was, but they're not going to be able to come and go from the courtroom by walking down the center aisle and then going out into the hall and
Mm,
wandering down in the hall where they've got, people were basically shoulder to shoulder, and then
mhm,
get on the public elevator. And, it just would have been a disaster. So when Amber and Johnny would come and go in the courtroom, they
mhm.
would exit through doors that were on the rear of the courtroom. In other words, if I'm the judge, they would be back there. There was one on
Sure.
each corner. And then they would disappear back into, the office area of the courthouse. And then they would make their way downstairs through some sort of a back elevator. Probably the prisoner elevator, to be honest, because that's how the prisoners would have come and gone.
Uh-huh.
So, a lot of logistics like that, and the whole business of, Johnny Depp arrives or Amber Heard arrives in their respective cars. They have to open the back gate, bring the car in, close the gate so that somebody can't all of a sudden make a run and cause a problem. Wait till the gate's closed, open the car door, get out, walk into the courthouse. All of that stuff, I'm sure, was worked out well in advance.
Absolutely. I'm sure. I feel confident. Huh. That's all so interesting. Oh, I bet that was so interesting to see in person as well. Is there
really
a memorable
so unusual, obviously, too. That was the fascinating part.
Oh yeah, I'm sure.
And there were a bunch of lawyers there. Somebody asked me if there were other law tubers there, and yeah, there's a guy. Law and Lumber was there. There was an attorney, DUI guy who was from Chicago.
Yes, I remember that.
Law and Lumber, Rob is his name, I believe. He was there from he's local. DUI guy was there, I believe, from Chicago. There was a guy named Ian. Gosh, I can't remember his name. And he goes by
about Ian. Yeah.
Gosh, why can't I just had it on the tip of my tongue? The name of his channel, Runkle of the Bailey.
Oh, okay.
Runkle of the Bailey. He's a Canadian criminal justice and firearms lawyer, and he's from some, North Dakota. I'm not as familiar with the Canadian provinces as I am, but he was from way far away. He had been in West Virginia at a shooting competition. And on his way back to the airport, I guess he had some extra time. He thought, I'm just going to stick my head into this Johnny Depp trial. Well, that's all it took. He was there then religiously for the whole rest of the trial.
Wow.
And I remember him saying, there was a break at some point, I think between the 6th and the 7th week, and he was going to go back home. And I said, are you going to come back? And he said, I would really like to come back, but I need to talk to my wife about it in person.
Oh.
And there may be jewelry involved. And so I thought to myself, well, this will be interesting. We'll find out if on Monday of week 7, if Ian shows back up again from Canada. Lo and behold, here's Ian. How did it go? It went fine. I managed to make it work. My wife has been looking at a belt buckle or a ring or a necklace or something, and so I managed to make it all work.
Oh.
So
that's funny.
Probably a lot of stories like that.
I bet. I'm sure. Wow. That's interesting, though. He had just planned as a detour and it took over. That's funny.
Pretty much. That's one thing about the Washington area as well. A lot of people don't realize you don't have to drive far out of Washington, D.C. to really be in a rural area where you've got very winding roads up and down, they call them mountains. They're not Colorado type mountains or, they're not the Alps, but and very rural areas and, gun ranges and so forth. You only have to go less than an hour to get into that type of an area. Oh. So he was in that area. And like I said, he was on his way back to the airport and decided to take a little detour, and rest is history.
Sounds good. Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Was there something that stands out as one of the more memorable things you witnessed from your time being in the courtroom?
I just think the level of electricity.
Okay.
And what I said before about the day that Elaine really got dismembered by Camille Vasquez with the objections.
That was good.
That was painful to watch. Very painful to watch. You couldn't help but feel sorry for her. It's like, look, you should have had your act together before you came in here a little bit better. And you kind of got the sense that maybe she was winging it a little bit. But to see somebody taken down like that, especially as a lawyer, it was painful to watch. You couldn't help but feel a little bit bad for her. I forgot to mention, I mentioned Judge Azcarate as well. speaking of Elaine, I think Judge Azcarate was universally respected. She did a great job calling the balls and strikes. She had a sense of humor. She was on top of the circus atmosphere. She had to admonish the gallery several times to, hey, knock it off. We're not going to, shut up or get out. And of course, there was that famous episode with Amber's friend who was texting Eve Barlow.
Yes. Oh, I couldn't stand her. I remember that now. Yeah.
Well, she has only herself to blame. She tried to pull a fast one and claim that she was part of the legal team, which allowed her to use her cell phone. And then there was a case where she got in trouble for that because she had tweeted something. It got called to the judge's attention. She was then, I think, told to get out of the little area there where the lawyers are sitting. The lawyers had the counsel table, and I think there was a second row at the counsel table, and then they also had the first row in the gallery that overflow. Like Johnny Depp's girlfriend was sitting in that first row in the gallery. And I think Johnny Depp's driver and his security guy were sitting there as well. But Eve Barlow then went back to the back of the courtroom, and I believe, if I recall correctly, she was texting again. And then she got busted for that. And then the judge just said, get out of not only my courtroom, I think she was thrown out of the whole courthouse, if I remember. I'm sketchy on the details.
Okay. Yeah.
This is one thing too, and I think a lot of people don't understand. When the judge tells you do X, this is not an invitation to debate or to play games.
I'm sure.
This is, I mean, it's kind of unique, maybe in other parts of the world also, but especially in the United States. It's a dictatorship in the courtroom. The judge is large and in charge. She has people with guns in the courtroom at her disposal and handcuffs. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's like this is not hard to figure out.
Right.
This is not the time to play little cutesy games. I'll tell you one thing. I went into the courtroom several times, and when the bailiff came out at the beginning of the day and he went through all the rules about chewing gum and cell phones and hats and eating and talking and sleeping and all this kind of stuff, there were times when, for whatever reason, I forgot to turn my cell phone off. And rather than pull my cell phone out of my pocket and manipulate it in the courtroom to turn it off, I stood up, went out of the courtroom into the hallway, pulled my phone out in the hallway and turned it off in the hallway, and then went back into the courtroom. Because people didn't realize this, there were not only deputies in the courtroom who were basically walking up and down and eyeballing people and seeing what was going on, but there are surveillance cameras all over the ceiling as well.
Wow.
That I know we're being monitored, because there were times when all of a sudden a deputy would come in and would go find someone that was basically out of sight and tell them something. The funny thing is the most frequent thing that people were told, I almost got caught a couple of times. I had to laugh to myself. You're not allowed to sleep, obviously, in the courtroom. And they didn't like it if you really slouched back. They also didn't like it if you were hunched forward, because it made them nervous that, like, okay, if you're up, in your seat all tense, you're only half a motion away from jumping up and running up to the front of the courtroom, which obviously would have been a huge problem. I mean, that would have gotten you arrested, no question about it. But the most common reason that the bailiffs and the not the bailiffs, the sheriff's deputies would come around, people would nod off to sleep because, like I was saying, you've basically been up all night long.
Yeah.
Maybe you've gotten a couple of hours of sleep. So by the time 3 o'clock rolls around in the afternoon, everybody's just desperately trying to stay awake. So if you managed to fall asleep, the deputy would come around and tap you on the shoulder. And the rule was that if you got one of those taps, you had to get up, go out in the hall, and basically make a lap down to the far end of the courthouse to wake yourself up.
Yeah.
And then come back. And you would see these people, and you knew exactly what was going on because people would get the cue to wake up. And there would be this sort of, no, I'm good. It's like, no, come on, you out with me, take a lap. And these people would, kind of trudge out of the back of the courtroom, and they would disappear. And then about 5 minutes later, here they come back in again. They've reclaimed their seat. So that was kind of constantly going on. It was always really amusing. Not something that you normally see in a courtroom where people are basically about to collapse from exhaustion. But they had that system set up. I thought they handled it very well. The courthouse security was absolutely brilliant. One thing I forgot to say about Judge Azcarate too, and the little, these little cutesy games of, I'll just sit in the back row and I'll tweet from the back row. And I'm surprised Elaine did not pick up on this as well, because there were a couple of things that Elaine did. They were keeping track of the time that each side had to present their case. And at the end of the day, the judge's law clerk, I think his name was Sammy, would bring up a piece of paper to her and would say, okay, here's how much Team Depp has left, and here's how much Team Heard has left on the clock. She announced that one day, and it was clear. It was like it'd been a really long day. Everybody's clearly trying to go home and so forth, including the judge. I mean, the judge is a person. I mean, she wants to go home and stick her feet up on the coffee table and have a glass of wine too, she's just as tired as everybody else is. And Elaine started arguing with the judge about how much time, whether the calculations were correct on the time remaining. And I just thought that was a really lame move on her part for a couple of reasons. Number one, basically, she's just challenged the judge's right-hand man. The Mr. You've just insulted the Mr. Spock. You know what I mean, to Captain Kirk. And Captain Kirk doesn't like that when you go after Mr. Spock. And it could easily have been brought up the following morning. Hey, Your Honor, last night you gave us these numbers. I don't think they're right. Would you mind double checking? Blah, blah, blah. Well, it turned out even worse that she hadn't even gotten the right calculation. And in fact, the person who corrected her was Ben Rottenborn and said, no, Your Honor, it's okay. Elaine's wrong. Your minion, your Mr. Spock has got it right. The other thing that was so interesting about it was that if you look at Judge Azcarate's bio, not only was she the chief judge, basically in charge of the entire courthouse, she had been in the United States Marine Corps as an officer.
Okay, wow.
And she is married to a middle management level, I think a lieutenant, in the Fairfax County Police Department. So what does that tell you about her tolerance for nonsense and foolishness? Like the Eve Barlow little, I'm going to play a little game. You told me to leave and not to tweet anymore, but I'll just go in the back row and play little games and try and I'll fix you. I'll outsmart you. So as a retired United States Marine, married to a police officer, do you think she has any tolerance whatsoever for any foolishness? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Plus the fact that she's a judge. Like I said before, she rules the roost. She is large and in charge of the whole building. The whole building. So again, just talking about the notion of trial tactics and being on top of your game and realizing what you're dealing with and being aware of your surroundings. Just interesting stuff.
Yeah, yeah, it sounds like it. Wow. That's cool. Let's see. Tell us a little bit more about Amber Heard. Did you see you talked about hearing the, potential rumors or whatever of stuff going on behind the scenes. Did you witness any erratic behavior yourself, like directly?
Not directly. I will
Mhm.
tell you that her sister, I think her name was Whitney.
Whitney, yep. Mhm.
Yeah. Um, she would come and go to the ladies' room sometimes. I assume it was the ladies' room. For all I know, she could have been going to the snack bar, the water fountain, whatever.
Sure.
But when she would get up, and she did not come and go through the back of the courtroom. When she would get up to go somewhere, she would come down the center aisle of the courtroom and then go out the doors at the rear and into the hallway and go wherever she was going.
Mhm.
And she had a deputy escort her. And when she walked out of the courtroom, she could not make, I say could not, she did not make eye contact with any of the other spectators. She had her head down
Uh-huh.
basically like this as
Huh.
she walked out of the courtroom. I thought that was very odd.
That
And
is odd.
I suspect that that probably was a reflection of the attitude that Amber had as well about being in what she thought was a very hostile, very threatening
Oh.
atmosphere. And
Mhm.
I think that's probably why. I mean, Johnny Depp's sister didn't have a sheriff's deputy
Yeah.
dragging her around.
Right.
You know,
One could
neither.
argue maybe she's used to being dominated by Amber her whole life, so she just walks around like the like cowering down.
Yeah, yeah. Anything's possible.
Yeah.
Um, there was who was the guy? Never mind. Um, what else? Well, ask me
Uh,
something else
yeah,
if
I
I think of
can.
something.
That's okay. My next question was if you were Amber's attorney, what advice would you have given her?
Change your hairstyle, change
Mhm.
your clothes. Um,
Stop directly staring at the jury every 5 seconds.
yes, yes.
Uh-huh.
By the way, incidentally, talking about bad behavior, Amber's behavior in the taped depositions that they played, horrible,
Oh my
horrible demeanor,
gosh, yes.
holier, holier than thou, borderline, very obnoxious, come
Hostile, yeah,
hostile. Yeah.
yeah.
And uh, there was a lot of conversation about addiction and
Mhm,
substance abuse and everything. One thing that really stood out to me was there were two things in the courtroom. They have screens up at the counsel table. The judge has a video screen. The witness has a video screen. There are video screens in front of the jury, and then they have these big screens up along the sides of the ceiling of the gallery area.
mhm.
The first day that I walked in, I believe there was a nurse for Amber Heard that was talking about Amber Heard's health issues, such as they were.
Yeah.
They started out, they put this document up on the screen, and it was all of Amber Heard's health history, including all of her addictions. I, I, I want to be careful because I want to say I don't remember
That's okay.
100% clearly.
Uh-huh.
I'm confident. I'm fairly confident. I recall seeing alcoholic, cocaine addiction to this, and I thought, what a tragedy! What a tragedy!
Wow.
What a way to go through your life. The other thing
Oh,
that really blew me away was they talked about the the day that Johnny Depp and Amber Heard got married
mhm.
down in the Caribbean somewhere.
Yeah, Jamaica, I can't remember, it doesn't matter, uh-huh, yeah.
Yeah, and they had.
Bahamas,
I think they
uh-huh.
put up on the screen this list of, it's like an itinerary, activities for the day and so forth. And they were going to do this and this and this and this and this. And then they got to 4 o'clock in the afternoon,
I remember.
drugs.
Yep.
Who
Yeah.
puts that on the schedule of events for their wedding day?
I'll tell you
Honestly,
who do you remember who else did this? Meghan Markle. I bet allegedly, with her first wedding to Trevor is that they were
really.
handing out, rolled up substances. That's allegedly, but yeah.
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 And
I agree.
everybody's just sitting there going, what?
Yeah, who puts that on
What?
a schedule? And who needs to
This is
schedule?
the
That's
happiest day of your life, presumably. And what? What? You got to get high?
right.
I
Oh
mean,
my
have a,
god.
have a,
Have an extra cocktail and go have fun.
yes,
Yeah.
have a pina colada or
Right.
something, we'll put an extra shot in the, yeah,
I thought the magical feeling happened the wedding night. Not that scheduled on there. Wow, that's crazy.
right. And you see stuff like that and you're like, geez, I mean, these people,
Yeah,
again, these are people not like us.
not like us. Yeah, that I mean, it's allegedly, but supposedly that was the thing with Meghan Markle at her first wedding is they were handing out
Wow.
substances, allegedly. You never know, but that's what I'd heard. Yeah, I don't remember where that
Yeah.
story came from, but yeah, it's just like,
Yeah.
who does
It's
that? Who? I just
right.
I
Right.
don't care what people do in their own homes. I'm not even judging that. I'm just saying, like, do you need to put it on the schedule? And do you need to schedule that at your wedding? Okay.
Right. Well, it's again, if I were sitting on the jury, I would find that really interesting.
Uh-huh.
Not just for the reasons that we just talked about, but for instance, it's like, again, these people are living a different life. So all these allegations of, throwing bottles and cutting off the ends of fingers and smashing up, um, furniture and
Yes.
pictures and
Pooping
all
the
this kind of.
bed.
Yes. So you see something like that where it's like, okay,
Uh,
this person has all these addictions, and over here on their wedding day, they had to take time out to all get high.
yeah.
Um, all right, well, the weirdness aspect of this all of a sudden becomes believable after a while. So you hear these whacked out stories of stuff that happened, again, throwing of bottles and severing fingertips and all this kind of stuff. It's like, all right, well, I wouldn't have believed it if
Uh,
this was the story coming from my next door neighbor. But in light of all this other weirdness going on, yeah, I'm going to accept some of this stuff.
mm, yeah.
So, by the way,
Weird.
just to go back to what we were talking about a minute ago with Elaine and prepping Amber Heard, we kind of touched on this in the previous video, but um, the business about Kate Moss
Yeah. Mhm.
and the allegation that Kate Moss was pushed down the stairs by Johnny Depp. That was not supposed to be talked about. Ben Chu pumping his fist and saying, hey,
Uh-huh.
you know, um, we just scored a huge point there. And then again, the next morning, lo and behold, here comes Kate Moss on the screen from London, live from London. Here's Kate Moss.
That's
Did
weird.
Johnny Depp push you down the steps? No, I fell. I was clumsy. It had been raining. The steps were slippery. What happened then? Johnny Depp picked me up, carried
Mm.
me, whatever they said, kindest, most gentlest
Yeah.
treatment
Uh-huh.
of, he was a total gentleman,
Uh,
was ultimately incredibly concerned about my well-being, stayed with me, held my hand, blah, 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 blah.
mhm.
Again, client management on the stand, she should have been told, do not go there, that's radioactive. Um, Here are the reasons why,
Mhm.
if you insist on knowing why. But again, just we've talked so much about Harry and Meghan, and Harry and, well, I know best. I'm going to do what I want to do.
Mm.
Well, okay, there it is. Amber Heard did exactly the same thing. I'm going to
Oh,
talk about Kate Moss whether you want me to or not,
yeah.
Elaine.
It doesn't
And
work out.
no, no, she got her rear end handed to her over that.
Yeah. Wow. Mm. And then my last question I had as far as Johnny Depp Amber Heard was people really wanted to know about the Amber and Meghan of it all. Are there things that you, again, I know you haven't been in a room with Meghan, but you have with Amber Heard. Are there things that you just notice as similarities or differences? Like, is there things that you picked up on? People really wanted to know your opinion on Amber and Meghan and their similarities.
Yeah, well, I think if you would talk to somebody who really knows what they're talking about from a um, psychological or psychiatric perspective, or even a guy like
Mhm.
HG Tudor, who's also a great YouTuber and has contributed a ton to the conversations about narcissists in
Yeah.
particular. I would be much more comfortable knowing Amber Heard, representing Amber Heard, because I do believe that there's a side of her that is a soft side
Okay.
where she's able to let her guard down. She does not have an edge all of the time.
Mhm.
She knows she can, and I'm just talking about all of this is my perception and my opinion.
Yeah.
She seems to have a softness, a kindness to her that she is able to bring to bear. It's just that there are also occasions when she has this hard-edged side that comes out where she can be verbally aggressive,
Yeah.
and she apparently loses her temper and all of that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense.
I do not see those same characteristics in Megan. Again, I've never been in, as you said, in the same room with Megan.
Sure. Uh-huh.
And maybe she does have those qualities,
She
but
doesn't show them.
as we saw just the other day when she was out in Los Angeles, in Pasadena, hugging, and
Mm-hmm.
no. If
No.
Amber Heard was standing there and gave somebody a hug,
Mm-hmm.
I think I would be tempted to believe it.
Okay.
It would be. I think there would be some sincerity to it, and it would not be, oh, I know I'm going to have to hug an X number of people because there's a photographer, whatever direction, that's going to take my picture. I don't think Amber would be that way. I really don't.
Fair enough.
And don't get me wrong. I think Amber did some really funky stuff.
Sure.
I think she treated Johnny Depp very poorly. I do not think she probably has a good compass for how to maintain a relationship, especially one that's supposed to be a loving relationship.
Mm-hmm.
I just,
Yeah.
it's just a different. Again, people wired up very differently than a lot of the rest of the world.
I couldn't agree more. Well, John, I just wanted to say thank you so much for taking all of our questions and spending all that time just going through this. I find it completely interesting. I totally get your sentiments about how it just must have been electric in that courtroom. I just can't even imagine. It was coming through across the TV. So again, thank you for explaining this all to us and answering our questions. I just appreciate it so much. And yeah, you've kindly agreed to stick around and answer our Patreon questions. So if you guys are on Patreon, you'll be able to see a few more tidbits there. But John, I just wanted to thank you for your time and for going over all this with us. So tell us everything. How can we support you?
Oh gosh, well, you're very kind, and I appreciate the opportunity to come on.
Yeah.
And I do have an Instagram page,
Okay.
and it's Witherspoon DC on Instagram. And if you want to go over there, there's hardly anything on it, and I apologize for that. But if you want to reach out to me, or if you just want to follow me, if I end up doing a channel and I put up some interesting content about DC or whatever else, let me know. Shoot me a message over there, and if I end up, as I said, creating a channel, then I'll certainly blast that out to everybody and let people know.
That sounds good. Definitely let us know. And if you end up going back to the Palm or going to the Palm, let us know. Film that, will
Yes,
you?
right, absolutely.
That's awesome. Well, again, thank you for everything. So, guys, we'll be filming Harry and Meghan stuff very soon. So that'll be coming in a separate video. But again, if you're on Patreon, we got more stuff to come. But thank you so much, John, for your time. And I look forward to talking to you again very soon. Take care.
Absolutely. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. What did you think? I thought it went so well. I love talking to him. John, thank you so much for all your time, for taking our questions. You're so wonderful and generous, and we appreciate that. Please do give him a follow on his Instagram. It's the least we can do to say thank you for being so kind to us. And as soon as I can get him to start a YouTube page, I'll shout it out here and we'll build him up because I know he'll be great. But guys, thank you so much for watching. You mean so much to me. I appreciate that. If there's a question that didn't get answered that you'd like to know, you're welcome to leave that in the comments. And next time he's on, I'll try to circle back and see what's left to talk about. But again, thank you, John, for everything. Thank you all for watching. I cannot wait to bring you more stuff like this, and I'll talk to you again soon. Bye-bye.